What's up, everybody? We're live. It's the Denver Post Week 1 Broncos preview show. Parker Gabriel here, Luca Evans there. It is not, I guess, technically speaking, the First and Orange podcast, or maybe it is. I guess we can call it whatever we want, right, Luca?
A new live iteration coming direct to your homes or
Exactly. I mean, what else would you rather do on a Friday morning? Certainly not work. That's what we're aiming to do here. If you're bored at work, if you have headphones in at your computer, if you're still commuting, although please do so safely, you can come hang with us on Friday mornings. We're going to try to do this every week before Broncos games. Obviously, adjust a little bit for the various Monday nights, Thursday nights, etc. But when the work week is getting done, the Broncos work week, we'll come on here, hang out with people, and see what kind of questions you have. So we got some stuff to run through. First, if you have questions wherever you're watching, YouTube or Facebook, throw it in the chat. And then we'll answer as many as come in or as many as we can. If there are just thousands of questions, which
we get flooded. Naturally.
Flooded. Okay, so Luca, we just to set the sort of stage for the week, we know a lot about just sort of how the week's unfolded, but obviously there's still Broncos practice later today. We'll hear from Sean Payton after practice. Obviously, final injury report is out this afternoon with game designations for players, and so there's a couple that we have a close eye on, obviously, with Malcolm Roach, Dre Greenlaw, obviously Nate Adkins in that camp too. So where do things stand now, and what are we sort of watching for on the final injury report of the week this afternoon?
Yeah, well, we know from last night, obviously found out that Malcolm Roach has a calf strain, grade 2, which, can cover, it's a designation that can cover kind of a wide range of possible injuries, as I understand it. But I believe, Parker, you talked to a specialist last night who put it at, most likely maybe it's a few week recovery. In which case, I think you're potentially looking at a stint on the IR for Malcolm Roach. So that's obviously, there's incredible depth at that position, and this hurts certainly a lot less than if this came in, week 13 or 14 or what have you. But, Malcolm Roach is a really key rotational piece of that interior defensive line. I mean, that's the, self-dubbed sixth man of the year. So, really tough break for him. So it'll be interesting to see how kind of that recovery plays out. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that from your conversation last night, Parker.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, you want to see one of the things I've talked to Dr. Kenton Feibel, who's at Cedars-Sinai in LA, about is just kind of like the consistency on these things, like one man's trash is another man's treasure, but generally speaking, one doctor's, grade 1 strain is a grade 1 strain, grade 2 is grade 2. It obviously can be like, it's not just like, there's not just 3 injuries you can have. Every injury is unique.
Right.
And so it could be, we don't know all the details on this. Obviously there can be a grade 2 strain that's like closer to a 1, closer to a 3, but generally speaking, a grade 1 strain is sort of like a micro tear. Grade 2 is at least some, damage, partial tear. And then grade 3 is much more serious, where you're talking about, surgery, potentially months recovery, all of that. So sort of in the middle, at least is our understanding with Roach. And then literally you're watching Christian McCaffrey, for example, with a calf injury now, calf issue dealing too. You just sort of consistently reminded football, hoops, point guard, defensive tackle, whatever it is, running back, just are tricky injuries, like hamstrings, calves, tricky injuries. The Broncos do, a good job. They've done a good job with guys getting back from soft tissue injuries. But again, we'll see what, if anything, Sean is willing to say about that. Typically, with an IR move, they tend to make those moves on Saturdays. So that may not be something we learn for sure today. But yeah, that's Malcolm Roach. Tough break for him. He's at it. I mean, like all their defensive linemen, really, he's had a great camp. So going to be interesting to see kind of where that lands. We'll know more about that, at least in terms of game designation this afternoon. But it doesn't obviously look good for him on for this weekend for sure. And then Dre Greenlaw, I think, is a little more like it's a little more up in the air. And I don't want to sit here and pretend like we, know something or guess about an injury report, but we just know some things factually. He hasn't done a lot full speed in training camp. He didn't play in any of the preseason games or the joint practices. Yep. He hasn't practiced so far this week. And Sean Payton said they're going to take it slow with him to make sure that he, to try to have him healthy for the long haul, I think was his quote. So take from that what you will, and then sort of see what happens this afternoon, I guess.
Yeah. And I talked to Greenlaw's agent a couple of days ago, and he said essentially, like, this is a guy who hasn't really played football, at the level that he would like to since, the 2024, I guess 2023 playoff run leading up to the Super Bowl. And then obviously he tears his Achilles in that, kind of fluke, just literally running onto the field. And then he plays 2 games, starts 1 game last year. He's shut down for most of the year, and then, goes through this summer and then tears his quad. And so, he has been like, this is a guy who, football is a release for him. He loves to hit guys. He loves to fly around, and he just hasn't had that. And so he's been, I think understandably chomping at the bit a little bit to get on the field.
Right.
But, I think the Broncos position, and Dre's agent said this, is I think they're trying to rein him in a little bit so that he doesn't re-injure himself. And, you tear a quad. He obviously had a flare up about, a month ago in late July of, presumably that same injury. You just, I think, again, he's a guy that you would much rather have fully healthy, full go in, down the stretch of the season than you would in week 1. So I don't know what the plan is going to be with him, moving forward. But from everything that I heard, Greenlaw and his camp, his agent, they're fully on board with what the Broncos are doing. And, his agent, J.R. Carroll, even made the point that, like, if this was a different organization, I might step in and interject myself and try and figure out the plan. But, he feels like the Broncos have his best interests, at heart. And so there is trust there. So we'll see how that, progresses. I think it's a very real possibility that obviously he doesn't play in week 1 against the Titans at this point with back-to-back DNPs, but we'll see today what he's kind of doing in terms of the ramp up.
Similar with Nate Adkins, who's been a DNP both days. I mean, when he had an ankle injury in the joint practice against San Francisco about a month ago, he had the tightrope surgery on his ankle, as Sean Payton sort of told us, the next week, I suppose, in training camp. Those are normally, that's one of the things, like, literally, that Sean Payton said about the tightrope surgery. One of the reasons why they decided to do that with Nate Adkins was because it had a sort of defined timeline for recovery, normally 4 to 6 weeks. And so you just, and Sean said Nate Adkins too good of a player to not, to put on injured reserve and keep out for 4 weeks, but couldn't guarantee be ready for week 1. That sort of seems right on track. I mean, there's not that seems like a more straightforward one. I mean, we'll see when he sort of gets back on the practice field and starts doing that. So quick injury rundown, I suppose there. Luca, you've been going deep on the Cam Ward tape. You heard Vance Joseph talk about him. You listened to his news conference. What should Broncos fans know about the number 1 overall pick out of Miami and sort of like where he thinks things are with Tennessee coming into this game?
Super deep on the Cam Ward tape. I've actually just, I've spent more time just kind of obviously listening to what he's saying and, taken from his press conferences and this or that. And I just, I think the poise with him is very apparent. Like, he's got this ideal sort of number 1 quarterback pick balance of, like, clearly knowing at times that he's better than you, but at other times, taking the, like, PR approach of, I just got to get the ball to my receivers and let them do the rest and this or that. And with him, like the standout trait, the number one intangible for him is just kind of the self-assuredness in the pocket, the calm, the cool. And I think you pair that with like this Broncos pass rush that's been just frothing at the mouth to get to another quarterback, and it makes for a really interesting Sunday. Cam Ward, actually, if you go back and look at the numbers last year, I think he threw the second most touchdowns in college football among any quarterback when he faced the blitz. He was really good under pressure. But the one thing is I think he was 71st out of 84 quarterbacks, something like that off the top of my head, in terms of average time to throw last year at Miami. And he will not have 3 seconds to throw every play, on Sunday against the Broncos, presumably. So from there, it becomes a question of like, can guys like Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, Jahdae Barron, essentially limit like quick hitters and that sort of things to Tennessee skill players. And that's where kind of the Drake Greenlaw injury comes into effect a little bit, because all of a sudden you have Alex Singleton and Justin Shernadd, presumably, running around and trying to contain a little bit of this. So I think there is some intrigue there. But I do feel, Cam Ward's going to rip it. Like Vance Joseph said, he's trying to stick a dagger in you every play. Like a ton of praise from Vance Joseph on Cam Ward, which, I don't think is all kind of hyperbole. So they're clearly viewing him as a threat. And I think that's kind of an interesting, I'd assume they throw a ton of different looks at him in terms of pressure. So
yeah. that was my takeaway with Vance talking yesterday. He said, a lot of times with a young quarterback, you might want to make him sort of work through layers of coverage and all of that. He said,
not make him one dimensional.
Yeah. Right. He was like, you want to make him maybe think a lot. And he said,
or make him one dimensional. Actually.
Yeah. Right.
Mess that up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And not with this guy. Like this guy is like, we got to get bodies on their receivers and we got to heat them up basically. So, from a guy who led the NFL in man coverage rate last year and pressure rate last year, or near the top in pressure rate, like not too difficult to believe Vance Joseph when he says, we're going to man these guys up and pressure them till they tell us to stop playing, basically. So that's sort of what you expect. It's going to be interesting. It's just like, I think in a lot of ways, it feels maybe the teams aren't on paper quite as evenly matched as the Broncos in Seattle last year in the opener, but it has a feel sort of Denver's season opener at Seattle last year, where you can like Bo Nix, you can think he's got a good head on his shoulders, you can believe that, like, generally speaking, not a lot's going to rattle him and all of that, and yet it's still sort of difficult to imagine going into that sort of hostile environment week one and winning. There's not much history of it in the NFL. Not even number one overall picks going on the road and winning week one is a pretty sordid, endeavor. And so, yeah, do you think, does it line up well for Tennessee to come get one on the road in week one? No, it doesn't. But, they have some interesting pieces. Vance Joseph said he thought Calvin Ridley was one of the 10 best receivers in football. Like, and they've made some big improvements on the offensive line too. And so it's, I don't know. It's an interesting one, put it that way. There's no reason to think Denver can't get off to a good start, but let's put it this way, Luca, if something goes wrong for Denver on Sunday, what's it going to be?
I like how to just jump off that point there. I like how Vance yesterday was like, yeah, when I didn't know, essentially, I didn't know if Tony Pollard was any good.
Yeah.
And then he turned on the tape and he's like, wow, this guy's a really good player.
Right. Yeah. That was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty funny. I think for what could go, reasonably, my take on this is that Denver's offense could look terribly disjointed, with kind of these new pieces that haven't fully been integrated yet, and score 17 points and still win. So yeah. I think realistically, what would have to go wrong is Dre Greenlaw doesn't play. Alex Singleton is limited. The linebacker core is, just they get kind of beat over the middle of the field, which was kind of their issue at times if they had one on defense last year. So I could see that, materializing. Maybe Tony Pollard pops off. I really think there's a very minimal chance that Tennessee wins this game. I think it'll just be a matter of, overall performance. So yeah, I want to on the offensive side of things for Denver. It's a whole thing about, and I went back and I listened to Jeffrey Simmons' comments on
Oh yeah, the big shot that he
Bo
took.
Nix.
That what you're getting at?
Yeah, the big shot that he took at Bo Nix. I don't think. I mean, to call him, a guy who, they're anticipating he tucks and runs after he first read, after his first read. That's fairly objectively not true, I think,
Right.
at this point. But also, he very clearly was not taking a shot at Bo Nix there. Like, he was complimenting his mobility.
Yeah, right.
And he was saying, Tennessee has to kind of key in on that. And I do think it's interesting because, at this offseason, I think in talking with one of Bo's longtime quarterback coaches, he was like, they're anticipating that he might not have kind of he's not going to catch teams by surprise anymore with his mobility. Other teams might have more of a spy for him at times or this or that. So I'm kind of curious to see, he obviously had a really strong year, just kind of scrambling last year. And I'm curious to see how often he gets out of the pocket and tucks and runs when Tennessee is, very clearly kind of keyed in on him for that. And Cody Barton's over there in the middle and is very aware of what Bo can do from that regard. So kind of an interesting sub wrinkle that I'm curious to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right on that. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think there's some question just generally speaking about how, what Bo Nix's usage in the run game is going to be. I don't necessarily think, I wouldn't assume it's going to be different necessarily, because so much of what he does, and Sean talked about this last week, I think, maybe at the beginning of this week, about just he's a lot of the run stuff isn't by design. It's off of scrambles. It's, it's that, you get through stuff, or maybe there's quick pressure, you're out of the pocket, and then he can sort of beat an angle and get a first down or make some plays in the open field. Obviously, they're also going to do some designed run things with them. They did last year. The zone read is effective, especially in certain situations. And then, you kind of go from there. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that looks like. And one game does not a season make, right? What they plan for him on Sunday may not be what they plan for him week 4 against Cincinnati on Monday night. So there's that. But to me, yeah, I saw Jeffrey Simmons say that, and I was like, I think you might be wrong about this, but I also don't think you're really going after that. So that was my read on that too. Let's do this on the running back front. What are you most interested in? Is it just literally the Dobbins-Harvey role split? Is it who's up? Do they leave one of the 4 down? Obviously it would be probably between Bidet and Jaleel McLaughlin for who's the third back up. What catches your attention there?
I think what was interesting was, asked Joe Lombardi on J.K. Dobbins and his ability to play on third down. And, Joe Lombardi essentially, he said they have a lot of faith in J.K. Dobbins on third down, but he also said, in years past in Sean Payton offenses, they've had backs with more kind of defined roles. You have your guy here, you have your, called it a lightning back, you have your change of pace guy, this or that. And this year, I mean, at least, from what he said, they feel like they have a lot of guys who can do a lot of different things, which is pretty true when you look at this room. I think on paper, you kind of see how guys fit in certain places. But to me, I'm interested to see really how much RJ Harvey plays on third down because, I asked Joe Lombardi about his development in pass pro, and his first response was, "Well, he'll be even better in a year,"
Yeah.
which is not typically like a ringing endorsement of where a guy is at. But he also said if he's in there on third down, we trust him. So
Right.
um, I anticipate to me, it seems likely that you could get sort of a somewhat equal or 60-40 or something distribution between JK and RJ Harvey in terms of early down work, and then you'll get JK most often on third down, maybe some Bidet sprinkled in there, and then Jaleel gets a few change of pace touches
Yep.
Throughout the game. I'm really interested actually to see how they use Tyler Bidet, because I kind of think he caught a lot of passes in the preseason. He caught a lot of passes in camp. I think he could realistically, if he was higher up on the depth chart, he could be a guy who catches 30, 40 balls in a supplementary role. So I'm curious to see about that. So
Yep.
there's a lot of, this running back room. If you drafted either RJ Harvey or JK Dobbins in fantasy, I don't envy you, because we don't have any idea either, to be honest. So yeah.
It's like you saw one thing, you saw one thing in sort of camp practices, right? A more in the joint practices, a little bit more even split. And then in the preseason games, Dobbins really didn't play much, but you saw it in the preseason games, it looked more like Harvey and then Dobbins as sort of third down plus. But that's also one of the guys is a veteran who's had a long injury list, and the other guy is a rookie who you want to get game reps and to feel NFL game situations. So it could just easily be that too. So it's going to be fascinating to see kind of how they do that. I think one thing I feel good about saying is just that, with Sean Payton, he wants the backs involved. He hasn't always been run heavy. Obviously, he's known for these high flying offenses, especially in New Orleans. But they ran the ball a lot, largely because they led a lot when he was in New Orleans. But also these guys, he wants backs that can make plays in space and catch the football and make plays in the passing game. And both these guys, I think, have that ability. And so that I just think over the course of the season as it unfolds, you'll see RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins both catch the ball a lot, make a lot of plays in the passing game. So that's kind of where that is. Luca, I have a horrible admission to make here 23 minutes in.
I'm going to guess that we have no questions.
Well, we have no questions, but I think that's more user error though, because I'm looking at the live stream on YouTube and comments are disabled, which makes it really hard to leave a comment. So this is a trial and error one for everybody. The thing about the first quarter of the season, Luca, is there's 32 teams that are racing to improve. And it's all about who can make the biggest strides between week one and the first quarter of the season.
Right.
And the teams that do that are primed for success, from there on. And so one of the improvements we're going to make is to try to make this live chat actually
try to turn the comments on
functionality. Yeah, that would.
What did Sean call it? Accelerated
learning.
Learning. Yeah. We need. Yeah. Clearly, we need to accelerate our learning of.
Yeah, maybe we just need to learn. Period. That would be a start on this.
That would be a start.
I was looking. I kept looking over here. I got a monitor. I kept looking over here trying to figure out how to enable the comments, and I just simply could not do it. So Next Friday when we're back, we will actually have. Hopefully,
we will turn the comments on.
Yeah. We will take the ability to have comments on this show to be a question and answer show.
Right.
And until then, we'll just I'll have to wear the scarlet letter for the week, and it will be really embarrassing, and everyone will wonder, "Oh, is that the guy?"
Yeah, everyone in the media corps will laugh at us for the next week. Then that's fine. Yeah.
You got to have a sense of humor.
Yeah. Shrug
That's it.
off.
Before we go, prediction, Luca.
What did I write? 24. I said 24-10 Broncos. I think the offense will be a little bit touch and
Up and down.
go
Yeah.
at times. Like they're, but I could see. I think I said like I said to you yesterday. I think Cam Ward. I'm gonna go like 188 touchdown pick, something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
60% completion rate. Like I think he'll make some plays, but there's just it's a tough defense.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Even if Malcolm Roach and Dre Greenlaw both don't play, it's still
there's
they've got depth. So
there's depth.
yeah, I think I was in a similar neighborhood, 28-13 maybe. You always wonder about like the late score or something like that, but
Good point.
I could see. I think the way Denver gets itself in trouble is multiple turnovers, just like any game you play in the NFL. But also, I don't think multiple turnovers the other way is out of the question at all, just given the circumstances and first game and all of that. So 28-13, both.
Do you want to know, before we get off here, you want to know a kind of a crazy stat that I discovered in my scouting report research yesterday?
I do want to know a crazy stat.
Well, first off, incredibly niche, but according to Next Gen Stats, the Titans. Hold on, let me pull this up here real quick. Firstly, they had the second best pass defense in the league last year.
Yeah, and I think L'Jarius Sneed wasn't even really like
he played 5 games.
Yeah.
And when he was on the field, according to Next Gen Stats, they had the lowest completion percentage. It would have been the lowest completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks in the league. So, when you look at their secondary, there's not like they signed Xavier Woods from the Panthers. He's pretty good, but there's not like standout name. But it's a really good secondary. I think they were they were second in the league in total yards allowed last year, but they were near the bottom in rush defense, which makes no sense to me. But because they were second, because they were so good in pass defense. So I'm curious to see that. We might not get a 350-yard barn burner from Bo next week 1. So yeah,
it's going to be interesting, and that also leads into seeing some of the. There's been a lot of talk about the outside zone stuff in camp and sort of tweaking, revamping the game. Obviously, 2 new backs, same offensive line. So, if you're a run the dang ball guy and you're watching and you've been trying to comment that for 28 minutes, but you haven't been able to because we have comments disabled, I apologize, but you can yell it at your television or at Empower Field on Sunday. And then you can put it in the comments next week when we get this straightened out. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll have this posted on our website, obviously, too, as sort of a replay type of scenario. We'll be better next week. And by that time,
we'll watch the tape.
We'll watch the tape and get better. By then, there'll have been regular season football in the NFL, which is terrific. That's back. Better. Yeah. We'll see you on Sunday at Empower Field. For Luca and Parker, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.